we forget that we're on a journey. We're never quite there. And so maybe this all took me so long because it took me a long time to get to the point where I was ready for it. Maybe it was just that there were other parts of my life that needed to happen first and they take time. I don't know. And only the mind of God knows that. But, I can only presume that, that was when I was ready. And so I guess I was or deserving or whatever.
Yeah, that's so well said. I love that. I really do. And that makes perfect sense to me, that you have to, you become ready when it's almost like you're just ready when you're ready, like the time has come. And so with the paranormal part and the things that you've experienced, can you take us into some of your experiences as a child, or when you're growing up?
Sure.
And then I'd like to also hear about, you mentioned a real recent one recently that I thought was very interesting on a trip you had just taken, about the thing. So I don't know if you want to share that again, but
sure.
But if you could talk about some of because I know that this is why, like, to me, the spooky. I know people say don't, spooky. Well, I've always liked spooky too, and so I think that anyway. I'll be quiet. I just want to hear what you have to say. Yeah, tell us some experiences.
Okay, so the first experience that I remember, and I think this might have been my earliest experience as I think back, and it wasn't a ghostly experience, but I did. The first paranormal event of my life that I recall happened when I was 14 years old. And I think that was about 14. It was right in that range anyway. But my best friend at the time and we lived in he kind of lived down there on weekends and I lived there all the time. So a lot of the time I just grew up, without anybody around. But other than my brothers, that's hot and cold, as anybody with a family knows. But he would come on weekends and we would hang out. And one of the things where we lived, it butted up to a state forest, and it was preserved. There was no hunting or anything in there, and it was just this beautiful forest land on along the Mississippi River. So we decided to hike to the top of this bluff that was in the forest land there. And it was a real ritual thing that we'd done. We'd done it, maybe dozens or hundreds of times through the years as we were growing up. But we decided to take a run up there, and we got to the top of the bluff and we're goofing around, and then realized, hey, it's starting to get late. We better get back down because, there's no lights up there. It's the forest, big hardwood forest, and it gets really dark when it gets dark outside. Even if there's moonlight, you can't see anything. So we're like, yeah, we got to get down. So let's get going. So we started going down, and we were going down this dry run. It's like, it looks like it's a stream bed, but it's dry, and it's only actually flowing with water in the springs in this limestone bluff. So over the eons or whatever, it carved out this stream bed that only is wet about, maybe a few weeks of the year. But we're hiking down. We got to this part where there's like a waterfall. There's not any water falling, but it's where the water would drop off down about 8 feet, and then it's like boulders, these limestone boulders, all through the bed of the creek going downhill. And that's the way we came up, and that was the way we would always come down. And so we're going down, and we stopped to take a breather at this waterfall part, and we're standing there, and this is in the southeast of Minnesota, and this really blew me away. But we both stopped there, and we're standing towards the edge of this waterfall near this drop-off point, and suddenly there's this deep, ominous growling right behind us, like feet are behind us and like higher than us, and we're both absolutely stunned. Now, a lot of times in certain cryptid experiences, people talk about infrasound and how they can't move and stuff. Now, I could have moved, but I was so terrified because this sound was so big. It actually was vibrating my body as much as I was hearing it. And I was sure, I had no idea what it was. But I grew up in this area. The biggest thing we had were white-tailed deer Other than that, there's, coyotes and raccoons and fox and stuff, but there's nothing this big there. There's nothing that big there. And I was just frozen in fear because I was sure whatever was making that sound was about to kill me. I mean, it was so intimidating and so huge. And I just, both of us did not move, did not look. Now I could have moved, but I didn't dare, because the one solace that I was taking was that whatever this is, I don't want that to be the last thing I see. Whatever it is, I hope this is quick. I hope it's painless. I don't know, but I was, you got no options. It's whatever's making that noise was just so big and so terrifying. And I said to my friend, I said, what the hell is that? And he goes, I don't know, but we got to get out of here. And so there's fight or flight, and whatever was making that noise was way out of fight range. So the only thing that was left is we ran. And so we ran down this boulder field, just literally, just recklessly, but we ran, and whatever it was, thank God, didn't pursue. And we both got to a point about half a mile or a mile away where the road finally was. And then we stopped and we're like, oh my God, what was that? And neither of us knew. And having grown up in this region, I had no concept for what that could be. I carried it for years and years, still not knowing what it was. And it wasn't until as an adult, I really started looking into the Bigfoot phenomenon. I was finding out, hey, they're not just in the Pacific Northwest. This is not just a weird anomaly in the Pacific Northwest. There are reports of these things all over the country. And I'm like, oh my God. So I went back up into those woods as an adult. And after having learned what kind of signs people attribute to these things, and I'm finding things up there that don't make sense, like, saplings that are about 4 to 6 inches, I guess small trees, not saplings, like 4 to 6 inches in diameter, snapped off with nothing weighing them down in this forest. Like, it's not like something fell on and took it down. And it's not snow load, because these are not the kind of trees that buckle under snow load. And so there was never that much snow anyway. So it was like, oh my God, maybe that was a Bigfoot. Now, I didn't see it, but I felt it. And then going up into those woods and finding signs that correlate to that, or at least correlate to something big like that. I found a structure up in those hills that was like, it was like dug out into the ground, but there was like broken logs that covered it with leaves on top of that. It wasn't cut. Nothing was cut like with a saw as if a person had done it. It was just broken pieces of wood. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? And so it just suddenly dawned on me, my God, maybe that was a Bigfoot that was right behind us. And that's the only thing that makes sense, because we were as high as it was getting. And yet whatever it was behind us and still much taller, like as if it was like maybe at 8 foot range, looking down on us and growling. I have no idea where it came from. I have no idea where it went after that, but I do believe that they are potentially there. And so that was my takeaway of that. And so that was my first experience that I remember. And I didn't have a lot of paranormal experiences even after that, other than one time when I was driving with a friend when I was 16 or 17 and he was about 15, and we lived in a small town, so there wasn't a lot to do, and we were driving around. I just remembered this the other night when I read a story on the portal, and I was like, oh yeah, I've seen something like that. And what it was this we were driving around. It's about 2 a.m. The whole town is dead. There's nobody up and around. It's just absolutely like a ghost town at that time of night in a small town. And we're just driving around BS. And I wasn't a drinker or a party or anything, and neither was he. This is the kid that I was telling you about that knew he wanted to be a preacher or priest. So he was real straight laced. And so we just like to hang out and talk. And we're driving along, and suddenly I see this light in the sky ahead of me. And I'm like up in the road, and we're driving on this residential area, and about 30 or 40 feet above the road is this ball of flame. And it's flames, like looks like as if somebody had a big round piece of charcoal that was just lit and just dragged it slowly through the sky. Was not like a meteor or a comet or anything like that. It was like it was a balloon, except it was on fire and drifting slowly by. And I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And again, for both of these experiences, I'm so glad that somebody was there with me, because at that point you'd be questioning, did I really see that? Did that really happen? And so I knew in both those cases it did, because the people I was with experienced the same thing. And he's like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, well, should we follow it? Because I was thinking of like changing direction because it was moving out of view. And he's like, no, we should not follow it. So, but I don't know what that is even to this day. Is it a spiritual thing? Is it some kind of weird UFO thing? Or is there some elemental thing going on there? Or is it angelic? I mean, I didn't know, but it was just a really weird, bizarre thing. And it was crystal clear. It was in the, this night sky all by itself, just twinkling stars in the background. But it was like this ball of fire just drifting lazily past in the sky. So
And how up high was it?
About
like 20 feet,
30 feet? 40 feet, probably above
okay.
Maybe a little higher, because I think it was above treetop level. So maybe it was more like 50, 60 feet. But this ball was about the size of a basketball, I guess, and it was just drifting by. So whatever it was, I don't know, but I can only chalk it up as paranormal.
Oh God, it's definitely got to be paranormal. And
Right.
It's just fascinating to me because I know you also have talked about the orbs, but if
Yeah.
you think about it, the orbs, that could have been a very brilliant type orb.
Maybe.
That was just, I don't know, I guess like you said, you really won't know really, but it definitely, has something to do with magical
Right.
something,
Yeah.
and the colors were bright and fire and gold. So that also makes me feel as if it's, of like a higher vibration.
Yeah. Right.
Higher frequency.
Sure. And
And I'm sure it knew you were there. I mean, I'm sure it was knowing you were there too. I'm sure it could pick up on people by it.
Right. And I'm sure you're right. It was just one of those cool situations. I saw it. I'm really, after all of my experiences, except for being growled at, that was absolutely horrible. I'd never want to experience that again. But after the point, even though it was terrifying, I've always felt very, very fortunate to have witnessed the things that I have. And there's a whole truckload more that I'll tell you about as well. But in the case of the orbs that I saw, I've seen orbs on 2 occasions in my life, and that was, I guess the first one was about when I was 20, maybe 21 years old. And I was with I think we were just engaged at the time, but she would have become my first wife eventually. And I used to work nights and she worked days doing, accounting kind of stuff. And so I worked in a cabinet factory at that time, as a matter of fact. And I got home after my shift, and I used to like to relax, and I was a smoker back then. So I was sitting on the floor in my living room. The house was brand new. And there was other ghostly events that happened in here. I'll get into the next one after this, but just speaking of the orbs that I've seen. And suddenly I'm sitting there on the floor, and this strange little ball of light, and it's golden light, but it looks like a little miniature sun, but not that bright. I mean, it wasn't like glaring in the eyes where I had to look away. It was just a bright golden light. And it's about the size of a quarter or 50-cent piece. And it's suddenly just drifting in front of my face by about 1.5 feet or 2 feet. And it's just slowly going by, and I'm looking at that. And at this point, I had no idea what an orb was. I didn't really know that much or anything about the paranormal at that time. So I'm like, what exactly is that? And I'm looking at him like, should I grab it? And I'm thinking, no, I probably should not grab that. I don't know what that is. And so I just kept watching as it drifted by my face. I mean, it was just clearly going, here I am, I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at it. And then it just kind of goes beyond my peripheral. I turn my head and it's just gone. So it just disappeared. And I've seen physically seen an orb a second time as well. And that was about 1.5 years ago in this house, and that I'm in now, where the studio is. And it woke up, and the first thing on my mind was coffee. So I'm getting up, and I'm I don't look around. I'm a slow riser in the morning, but I have my eyes open, and I'm navigating through the house, came downstairs and went into the kitchen. And the way you go into my kitchen, it's kind of like you have to do an L. So it goes this way, and it goes to straight ahead as you're facing the kitchen, and then it kind of dog legs to the left 90 degrees. So, and suddenly I'm walking, I'm looking down at the floor like, oh, just being awake was was already a task. But then suddenly a similar looking gold ball of light is about 1.5 feet off the floor, comes around the cabinet. I'm seeing it. It comes up to my legs and shoots around me, and then it's gone. And that was the second
Wow.
seeing these actual orbs. And I'm kind of critical about like pictures of orbs because I think there's a lot of mechanics to cameras, and especially digital cameras, that can give you all kinds of reasons to have orbs in your pictures that aren't actually orbs. They can be dust, they can be precipitation in the air, it can be insects close to the lens, it can be a lot of things. So but these were literally look like little suns just drifting by, and so I'm sure it was either spiritual or possibly, if you believe in that stuff, it could be fairy as well. And I kind of keep an open mind to everything because I don't pretend to know all the things that are possible in this world. But those were the 2 times that I saw orbs.
That's literally really pretty amazing to actually, be fully awake, seeing that, just as it is. And, so I definitely think that those are all communicators with you. They're communicating to you. Was this the same house that you were in the first time? It's a different house?
A completely different house. The first time was in Minnesota, and now I live in the north part of Idaho. So it's quite a ways away.
So see, I just think that these are, part of communicators with you.
It could be. I'm not sure what they're telling me.
Sure. It's just that they're there, it's like,
oh, sure.
I don't know. Did you get a feeling? Did you have a sense or a feeling around them?
Both times it was more just a feeling of wonder, like, wow. First time was like, what is this? I don't know what I'm looking at, but it's a little ball of light. And the second time was just, oh, wonder, I didn't know that was here, because I'd never had such a visual anomaly happen before here in this house. There's been plenty of activity of supernatural means, and perhaps, just by virtue of doing a show, it may attract some of that, but I always try to be real conscientious about keeping the cleansing up and, making sure to say prayers and cleanse the house with different means. So I've managed to keep that at bay, but I think there is something about doing a show about the paranormal and then paranormal things happen. In fact, I get emails from listeners like, I've never had anything happen before, but I've been listening to your show for a while, and suddenly a picture keeps falling off my wall, and it's of so-and-so, like maybe a dead relative of theirs that they had up on the wall. I'm like, wow. I've had people, write me about the weird anomalies around their house after they started listening to the portal. So I'm like, oh, but I think everybody that's contacted me about things like that takes it in good stride. I mean, they weren't like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? This is terrible. They're all like, wow, this happened. So,
because we all do take, it's all energy. So if you're talking to people and think you're bringing up subjects, it's almost like little doorways can open. So it is something you have to be careful about. And I do believe that, I like that you're saying that you make sure you do the cleansing and prayers and things like that. That's very important, as I definitely know. One thing I got to tell you is about that growl. Okay, because so you were thinking, okay, I've heard a similar growl, and it was here on the property. And the first part of it was I heard a scream. I was on the back porch, and I heard what sounded like a little girl's piercing scream.
Oh.
Okay. And but it was over here. So I'm in the one cabin, and this is the cabin that my older son and his children were at. And I thought, well, maybe the little girl is screaming. So I took off running out the door, and I'm like, I heard somebody screaming. So I went to run around the front. And when I ran in front of the house, and then my son came running from another direction because he heard the scream as well. But he said he was outside, and he comes running thinking he heard it was his daughter too. But his daughter was inside.
Oh.
And so we both, she did not scream at all. There was no, it was a little girl's scream. And I told you we have lots of little girls, not little girls, but children in spirit here. But anyway, what happened then was like, we were already like, wow, did you heard that? And we're both like together outside this cabin. And the next thing you know, Brent, so I think I heard this story. I don't know if it was last night or the night before that you had talked about this growl, but it was the same type of growl. It was bone curdling, chilling, loud, like I've never heard any kind of growl like this in my life. And we're the same. We don't have a lot of things. It was not an animal. It was this deep growl, which it was demonic. It was a demonic growl. I mean, at that time, I hadn't even met Bill Bean yet. So
okay,
I really wasn't even going into I wasn't going into the demonic. I don't know what I was going in, but
sure.
It was that kind of growl out of nowhere. There was nothing here. So it was one of those things like, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget it. And I didn't have it recorded, but we both heard it. We both experienced the little girl scream, and there was no little girl. It was just right here, so it was like right in the backyard, but it wasn't. There was no little girl. It was a ghost. And then the other one, I think, was a demonic growl, but it was like, I can't even explain it. But so what I'm wondering, since, it could have been a cryptid that where you were at, or it could have been something like that. And so they must be able to come through. I don't know. Like they must, I think that they're portals. I do believe that. I believe that they can come and shift through time openings. And so, but there was nothing physically inside to make this growl.
Okay.
And it wasn't like above, below, it was like around. I mean, it was like encompassing.
That's
so.
Yeah.
Was yours like up high? You felt like it was up high?
Felt like it was like from about 8
in the trees,
feet behind me. No, not that high. Just feet behind me and just taller, like it might have come out from a part of the draw that we didn't see or something. I mean, with the cryptids, they blend in so well, and I'll be to tell you, at that age, I was never expecting to even look for something like that in those woods. So, but I mean, if it was a Bigfoot, they have a naturally occurring ghillie suit, like like military snipers use to creep up on people, and so I bet you blend in real well with their surroundings. But I'm not discounting anything. Of course, I didn't see what it was, so anything is certainly possible. But it did have a direction. It was definitely behind and taller, by by what felt like several feet, but which was.
It's scary, huh? That's scary.
That horrifying. Yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. But of all of the experiences I've had, that's the most terrifying one that I've had as far as paranormally concerned. I think I really thought I was about to be killed by something. And I mean, what do you do? I'm a 14-year-old kid, so I just didn't.
I'm glad you didn't get killed.
Me too.
But see, isn't it interesting that part of your life was the part that was going to come to be now, where all of a sudden you're part of that world of trying to find out, what is that? What is this? What's going on here?
Yep.
I love that. I love that that's how it kind of came full circle in a way.
It's kind of interesting because when I first started doing the portal, I very intentionally didn't talk about any of my own experiences. And the reason why is because I didn't want it to sound disingenuous. Like, oh, you have a paranormal show. Oh, and you've had a bunch of experience. Sure you have. Because it just sounds like, it sounds almost disingenuous to make such huge claims. But it was, I guess, a couple of years into doing the show that I started talking about my experiences. And then the feedback I got was amazing. Like, oh my gosh, that's amazing that you had that happen. And then people would start talking about their experiences. So I came to realize, I guess it was my fear more than anything, but people felt that, I was somebody that had experienced these very things that they had. And I think it served as a catalyst to initiate a lot more conversation. And so in the end, it was a great thing that I did finally start talking about it. But I was very, very concerned about what that might look like to people. And once I just let go of that and decided, you know what, I've had these experiences, I should talk about them too. And, maybe that will, help. And it did. It really did. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people out there that have, there's a lot more than most people. Usually there's somebody has a story. Yeah. Somebody in their lifetime has had at least one experience. I think there was a guy on your channel last night that was talking about, the cloud.
Oh,
I think that was last night. Yep. And, he said, I haven't had a lot of experience, but what a experience was that? And I could just see it, because the clouds can come very fast. Mm-hmm. And then I do believe that when we look up at the clouds, I do believe that a lot of these clouds and things are, they can be manipulated. I believe that by, everything can become, yep. Especially in the Native American, sure. That's how they work through is the animals and the trees and the plants, so I believe that could be definitely something. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, many spiritual traditions talk about the spirit of things. And I think, even in terms of Christianity, if God is the creator of all things, that means that all things have the resonance of the divine in it. And so all
exactly
are connected to that divine source, and otherwise they wouldn't exist, because outside of God there's nothing, right? So I think that there is all of these things are a part of us, and we are a part of them by virtue of being alive and being from the source. And so I think that if there's spirit in all things, and I think there is, then all things have the ability to change and can be changed outside of their own, their own source. I don't know if that made sense. Outside of their own natural behavior, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, we think clouds move because of pressure and atmospheric barometric pressures and stuff. But I think that anything can be changed, because if you're operating in a divine way or with divine intention, then all things are under the dominion of what we understand as God.
Yes, exactly. And like some people will say that they, like for instance, redbirds. My mom loved redbirds. And so I even wrote a little song of God working on about her coming to visit me as a redbird. Mm. And this is something very, very interesting. So it was Mother's Day. It was her birthday the other day, and she's in heaven. And so Joe, out of the blue, says, Helen, I want you to, when we're doing our prayers and ceremony for her, and he goes, Helen, I want you to come to one of us as a redbird. Mm. And it just came out of his mouth. And the next day we're outside and I'm watering the trees over here, and I haven't seen a redbird. I have not seen a redbird in years. We're in Arizona, we have redbirds, but I haven't seen any. And he runs up to me and he goes, there's a redbird right there in the big ironwood tree. And he saw it. I saw it fly away, but it was the next day, Brent.
That's really
cool. The day after her birthday. So I think that they can they can come in and they can give us messages in so many ways. And I think has that. So I think that's a lot of what your little anomalies, your little light things are.
Yeah, it could really be. I wish I could remember if I was having an issue with something particular that maybe they were bringing some inspiration or whatever. But I'm not good about being that methodical with my cataloging. Oh, today, journaling or something like that. So
Right.
I don't recall if there was something substantial on either side of those things, but I do think that they were, as I said, I think that the paranormal is the demonstrations, and they're showing us. And if at the very least, it's just nice to know that we're not alone. I think to me that is actually comforting and reassuring. I've lived in very haunted situations and had lots of spiritual activity throughout my adult life and many different locations, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't really like scare me, and I don't want to put that out with arrogance or anything, because it's really not. It's just when I've had these events happen outside of the growling, I've always been like, wow. And I felt, as I stated before, very fortunate to have seen and witnessed that, because to me it just reaffirms there's so much more. And I love that. I think that is phenomenal, and it's exciting, because could you imagine how boring the world would be if there was nothing left to learn?
Oh yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah,
totally. And you know what? I love how you're explaining that. Well, I didn't know you'd lived in lots of haunted situations. That's really cool, actually, for me, because now that the demonic or whatever the horrible stuff isn't here anymore, and you could feel it. It's like, I can feel if it starts to creep in, or somebody comes around, and that they're carrying that on them. But there's protection, I know, to do and all that. But what I do know now is that I am in communication. Like we are one with the ones that are here. And it is fascinating. Like the other day, let's say, for instance, I was sitting on one side of my kitchen, standing there doing something with the vegetables. Joe was on the other side. And Brent, what happened was phenomenal. Footsteps came bounding through between us.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I thought it was my son Tristan. And I quickly went over, and I looked to go see if he'd come out, and I had just missed him, but it wasn't. So Joe and I both turned and we're like, you heard that, right? And I'm like, yeah. So it was literally, we hadn't had a lot of activity in a few weeks. And then all of a sudden it was like, it just all kind of some activity. It was like, boom, 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 right? I'm like, wow. But it wasn't scary. It was like wanting us to know that they were there. I don't think it was a scary thing. Nothing feels, I know we had footsteps before, but honestly, sometimes I think that was like the children. And I don't think they're scary.
Right.
But so on that, when you grew up in the haunted houses, did you have any other experience, like as a little boy? Oh, the dreams that you had, was that from a little boy too?
That was in my teen years, and that was probably like around 15 years old. It's a really strange series of events, because when I was going through it, it was pretty heavy, but I think I was about 15 or maybe 16 when it all kind of started, somewhere in my teens. I don't remember exactly for sure where it started, but I know it was something I dealt with for a number of years. And it would be these strange dreams, and they were very lucid dreams. Like I could make choices and I could influence the dream. But what was happening was, in these dreams, there was this man, and he was like an older man dressed all in black, with a black flat brimmed hat, like a really wider one though, not like a tight brim. It was like pretty wide, like a Western type of flat hat. And I knew he was after me, and I would be running away from him. And no matter where I went, what I did, he would be there. And in the dreams, they were so lucid. It was like, I'm a kid. So I'm like, well, I can fly now. And so I'd fly somewhere as fast as I could. And in this blinding speed. And when I got to where that was, there he'd be. And just with this, like the wicked smirk, I started climbing walls like a Spider-Man, got to the top, and he'd be there. And it was like, I couldn't get away from him. And he said, no matter what you do, you can't escape me. And I was like terrified. Wake up and my heart's just racing. It's like, oh God, thank God it was just a dream. because they're so real and so profound and absolutely terrifying. But these dreams went on and on and on throughout my teen years, and then suddenly they just kind of stopped. And I didn't think much of that, but I have a son. He's 27 now, and he got into his teen years, my oldest son, and he's like, "Dad, I'm having these weird dreams." I said, "Oh, what's going on?" He goes, "There's this guy," and I was like, "Wait a minute, is he an older guy with white hair, dressed in all black with a black hat?" "Yeah, he's after me, Dad." And I was like, "What?" So he's having this dream series. And it went on and on and on. And then finally it kind of stopped for him. But then when my middle child, Oliver, got old enough, he came to me and said, "Dad, I'm having these weird dreams." And I was like, "Wait a minute, is the black clad guy in there?" "Yeah, he's after me." And so myself and two of my children have dealt with this series of dreams where some guy is after them and after me, and no matter what we would do, they're all terrifying dreams. The same idea. They couldn't get away. He just kept saying, "You can't escape me. You can't escape me." And so it was just terrifying. But then suddenly they would just be over. And I don't know whether it was just an age thing or whatever, but what are the odds all that three of us would have the same dreams? And I got a 6-year-old coming up now, and I'm just thinking, man, when he's a teenager, is he going to have these dreams? And it's really weird. I don't know what to make of it. Is it some kind of generational thing? Is it a family quote unquote curse or something? I don't know. Just very weird. But
I think it is. I think it has to be, because it's a reoccurring theme. It's a reoccurring spirit. Luckily it didn't damage. It didn't. Well, it probably scared you and altered you in some way.
Sure.
Just by fear, because I know the similar dark shadow man was in the dreams with me, and those were blood curdling, scary all the time here. So, but that is so interesting that at the same time period that they last about the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just very strange. Whatever they are, I don't know.
Wow.
But I will say that in the dreams, this is a very tangible person. He's not. It's kind of very, very similar to the Shadow Man, though. That's interesting that you say that, because many descriptions of the Shadow Man depict him as this male-looking figure in all black and wearing a flat-brimmed black hat, and sometimes with red glowing eyes. But maybe it's another representation of that same kind of entity. And shadow people are interesting because and this is information that Don ended up pulling up years ago, but we found out that there was a man training as a shaman with I think it was the Cherokee, and he was on Coast to Coast with I think it was Art Bell back in the day, but he was talking about shadow people. He says in his culture, according to the training he had, shadow people are not negative, horrible things. They're actually performing a function in that they do come, but they do come to as almost a utilitarian force to absorb negative energy and to take it away from people. And so I thought that really interesting as well, because oftentimes you hear shadow people and you're like, "Oh no, this is horrible," but maybe they're not. And I don't know. I don't know if that correlates to my dreams in any way or not, but it's just very interesting.
Well, and I've heard that too, and especially in the Native American, and a lot of times the shadow. Now, our experience here, it was morphing into other beings too, but people would mostly see him, and myself as well, as a man in the shadow with. And Joe saw the whole hat thing. I saw like almost hooded. But then I saw him in my dream state or in the remote view state too. So I saw different ways, but I think that you're right, though. I do believe that a lot of the shadow is even undercover to do good. So I guess there's like good and bad.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the same. It's like a lesson anyway, right? Isn't all of this lessons we're learning?
I think so. But I think it's that a lot of paranormal activity in terms of ghostly activity usually does start with people perceiving shadows in their peripheral vision. Like it may not be shadow people, but they're perceiving these presences as moving shadows. And then it escalate from there.
And a lot of times, even when people are like, I can see very clearly now, but originally when I first began, everything was under a veil. Right. So if I saw anything, it would be like it was behind a curtain, a veil. Right. And that to me could literally be a shadow, like people would see that as, oh gosh, there's some old movie that you saw them like that. I think it was on a TV or something. I'm not sure what that was, and then they were behind a veil, but that's, that could look like a shadow, but it's a lot of those beings were angels or other things, Sure. So it's very fascinating, very fascinating.